This review is for Ancillary Justice by Ann Leckie, which was a unanticipated pleasure. So I hadn't heard of this book until I listened to a review by another YouTuber, Books and Bow, which I will link below unless my tech capacity fails me, but I'll try to link it below. Anyway, the review was good enough. It made it sound fresh, interesting and new. Ordered it from the library. It's a 2014 Hugo, Nebula and Arthur C. Clarke award winner, which doesn't always mean anything. I don't always love award winners, to be honest. Oh, The Locust as well. And a BSFA award, whatever that is. Anyway, if it hadn't been for Books and Bow's review, I would probably never have gone there, because I've got to say that the description on the back and on Goodreads isn't particularly exciting, and I don't think it represents the book particularly well. When I first started the book, you have one main character, I. You don't find out their name until quite some time later, who's on an icy planet on a mission to find something or other, and they find someone lying in the street. It's someone that they knew a long time ago when they were practically someone else, we understand, but there's no info dumping here. You learn what you learn very slowly, bit by bit. So this other person, it took me a while to figure out how to pronounce their name, and I'm honestly never been more than slightly certain that I might get all of these names are tricky. But the person that they found lying in the snow is called Sevarden or Seviarden or something like that, not sure. And I'll mention gender before I mention the world building. So the empire that both people belong to is gender neutral. You don't have gender built into the language in the way English and to some extent most Earth languages do. So when I is talking about any character at all, it refers to them as she, even when it makes it quite obvious in context that she is actually of a male gender. And I, who we later discover is called Breck, I guess. Probably Breck. It's with a Q. Let's go with Breck. Breck later describes the fact that even though they speak many languages, the gender always trips them up because their original language didn't have it. Now, the original language that Breck and Sevarden come from is an empire. It's obviously a galactic empire. There are gates that help ships get from one place to another. So it's obviously quite far-flung. It isn't info dumped at you either. You need to discover things bit by bit. Another name that I struggled with was the name of this empire, who doesn't have gender as part of their language. So it's written as RADCH. So what do we do with that? Is the CH a hard CH like Lord of the Rings orcs? That would make it Radach. Not many English or Romance language speakers like that hard. So maybe it's meant to be ch. If RADCH is a ch, then I'm sorry, it pronounces radish. So we've got a huge galactic empire called after a humble root vegetable, the radish. It's like, I'm cool with it. When it goes into multiple, though, it's RADCHAAI. Is that radishai? My brain hurts. Anyway, the empire of Radish stretches quite extensively, and we slowly learn more and more about it. We learn more and more about Breck's mission. But the beginning is more about saving Seviarden than anything else. Seviarden, whatever, has had a drug addiction and is no longer captain or a member of this civilization, and gets sort of dragged across the icy wastes by Breck on this mission that we're not sure what it is. It's charmingly written. The way I describe it doesn't make it actually sound like fun, but I loved it. I loved the non-gendering. I loved the descriptions of the land. I loved the internal descriptions of Breck and how she dealt with the hot mess that is Sivadin. I like the small snippets of civilization that come. It's like apparently their first aid involves some sort of a gel that gets put over it and hangs in there until it's done its job and then falls off. And that's both first aid and that more extensive injuries, which happen. A lot of extensive injuries happen later in this book. It even includes putting one through one's breathing apparatus to rejuvenate lungs. I really loved the subtle hints that you got of that. Now, the other things about this book that I really liked were the world building, or the galactic building, if you will, seems to obey a kind of a Roman Empire theory, which is the Roman Empire was built around expansion. As long as they had borders to keep expanding and other cultures to keep absorbing, to keep up a steady flow of soldiers to the Roman military, Rome was strong and it kept going. When the borders were fixed and they stopped having that culture of war against everyone who wasn't Roman, then in essence the Roman Empire started to end there, according to some people who've analysed it, not to me. I've just read their books. I'm no expert on the Roman Empire, but I really like that description. And it seems to me that Ann Leckie has based her Radish civilization on a generic Roman Empire style, because it is set up for expansion. It's set up to take over more and more civilizations, or planets, really, in this case. And they've got a few quirks. Their ships are named by size. So you've got Justice is a large size, a Mercy is somehow smaller, and then there's Swords. But every ship, and indeed every station, habitat, and so forth, is ruled by an AI. And the civilization is based on the AI having lots of ancillaries. And how these ancillaries are made is kind of a little bit chilling. So when they take over a planet, or at least when they did in their early expansion days, a certain percentage of any captives were basically frozen in the hold to be resurrected as needed and implanted with AI. There's a lot of tech here. Apparently everyone has different types of implants and different kind of body armor that you activate and protects you from things, but they're subtly done. There's no extensive description of the tech behind these things. Now, the notion of these ancillaries is really interesting, and it pervades the culture. The other thing about these ancillaries is that the whole culture is basically ruled by one Lord of Radish. I'm sorry, but what else can you really say? Now, the Lord of Radish has many, many ancillaries or clones. So basically there may be hundreds of this one character who's started it all out, and I never successfully in my head figured out how to pronounce this name. And I don't really know what gender they are, and that doesn't really matter in this civilization anyway. But let's see if Lord of Radish, where are you? So many of the ones we encounter are actually older, but the final one we encounter is a 5-year-old. Ananda Mianai, maybe. I mean, there's worse names. I just didn't hear it ringing in my head whenever I read it. It's a sufficiently distinctive name that I didn't have to either. So there's lots of interesting things about the ruler having ancillaries. It means that under some circumstances they can send a copy or copies of themselves to a situation if they feel that it may be a dangerous situation and these ancillaries or clones aren't going to come back. They send older ones that are near the end of their life anyway. But all ancillaries of an AI, and we assume all of the different clones or ancillaries of the Lord of Radish, all share a memory. So early on it describes the Justice of Torren, a name I love by the way, of a ship that is pretty diagnostic to the plot. You've got the AI, and it describes, I am doing this, but I am doing that. And this gives you the notion of dozens of eyes at different things and dozens of people all doing things, but at the same time, all of them being I. I love that. Now, this is the point where I need to mention spoilers. There's a few specific things I want to mention about this book, and if you haven't read it, I suggest you go away and read it and then come back and watch spoilers. One of these days I'm going to do a pretty spoiler sign that I can just lift up. From now on it becomes very spoilery. So it turns out that Breck actually used to be one of the ancillaries for the Justice of Torren. I think it was called One Esk. As I understand it, one of these huge ships has multiple levels, but instead of calling them decks 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., Ann Leckie gives them extra numbers. I think Esk might correspond with 5 or 6, I can't remember, something like that. So, of the ancillaries serving that particular deck, number 1 Esk, went down to a planet that had been conquered and assimilated, though there's other words that they used to call it by. It's basically conquering and subduing, with the lieutenant that had been sent down from the ship in order to organise it and calm it. Now, when this lieutenant went down, it was thought to be a short-term posting for her and the various ancillaries that went down with her. She was the first... Lieutenant Orn, I think it was a she. Okay, Lieutenant Orn, they were the number 1 lieutenant on the level of Esk, and with them went number 1 Esk and a number of other ancillaries. Down on the planet, bad things are happening. She's trusted by the population of the lower town, but less so by the higher town. The priest has insisted for a number of years that they stay and be in charge and not be replaced by someone else with human soldiers, as would normally have happened. So they've continued on there. And then something really weird and horrible happens. Guns are found, a plot is uncovered, and then before you know it, the Lord of Radish turns up and everything gets far more complicated. Now this isn't dumped on you, it happens later in the book, you have to work up to it. And by the time you work up to it, I, also known as Breck, who is now also known as One Esk from Justice of Torren, is already set in your mind and you are involved in their plot. So when you learn all this extra stuff that you kind of knew but didn't know, it all comes together in a really excellent way. I really liked it. Now when bad things happened on the planet, which I'm not going to go into too deeply, Lieutenant Orn and all the ancillaries, except for one that had been killed, went back to the ship. We learn a bit more about how the ancillaries are made, and it's pretty well thought out and really pretty gruesome in a lot of ways. One of the names for the ancillaries by people who aren't citizens or who don't approve is corpse soldiers, because basically they are the corpses of conquered planets that are frozen and then imprinted to be part of the AI. It's all pretty brilliant. There's small things that are put into this book that make it even more realistic and more interesting, like the religion. There's a religion, again, I'm seeing hints of the Roman Empire. I don't know anything about Ann Leckie or this book, but one of the things the Roman Empire did really, really well for a very long time is it didn't forbid people to worship their gods. Until Christianity came in, if you were a member of the Roman legion and there were enough of you, you could basically worship whatever you liked. If you're set in place for a while, you could have your own shrine, sometimes your own temple. Rome just absorbed every single religion that was around and didn't really care very much until Christianity. Christianity is very monotheistic. It doesn't approve of other ones. So the structure of the religion that is common to all of Radish is also fascinating. Really excellent world building. Now, that said, at one point I got really disgruntled with this book and nearly stopped reading. Around page 202, and at this point Breck has been schlepping Sevarden around all over the place. Not only were they dying in the street when they rescued it, they kept trying to steal from Breck, kept being sullen and annoyed. It turns out they're a drug addict, and then they sell the flyer with which Breck was taking them both down to the ribbon. I assume that's something like the Robert Heinlein beanstalk that takes you off the planet up to the station where you can catch a ship. She's planning on going off planet now that she's found what she wanted. Again, now that they have found what they wanted, I need to keep working on this, don't I? Right, so around page 202, Sevarden has sold their flyer. They're having to walk. Sevarden is chasing Beck, who is largely ignored being Sevarden. They cross this bridge, this glass bridge, which is absolutely stunningly described. Love the bridge. And Sevarden steps backward, falls off the bridge, and here's what I wrote at the time. Because the first thing that Breck, or Justice of Torrent, does is leap off the bridge to save Sevarden. And it really, really annoyed me. As I said, risking her life to save a dumb drug addict who had ripped her off and left her to die. I just don't like really dumb protagonists. Willful stupidity is still stupid. I got really, really annoyed. I put it down. I thought about do not finish, but instead I did pick it up later. The author did a good thing with that. The recovery was, instead of continuing on with the annoying Sevarden and the now almost fatally injured Breck, we went to a different part of the story. Hey, don't chew my buttons. Before going back. And I was wrong, and the author was right. They had mapped it out. I was thinking to myself, there would have to be a really, really good justification later in this book for me to accept the arrant stupidity of throwing yourself off a bridge to save someone who's been that annoying and unhelpful. This was obviously a plot twist that they had carefully mapped and planned. I thought it might be, I just couldn't see how it could possibly justify the annoyance. In fact, it did. The relationship between Sevarden and Breck, or Justice of Torrent, changes dramatically from that point. And that relationship helps build the rest of the plot, because Breck's intention is to kill one of the Lords of Radish. There's heaps of them. They know they can't kill that many of them, but that is still their goal. And the next stage takes them to a station which they only really get into, and into the groove of being able to continue this mission with Sevarden's help. At the end of this book, I don't know that I can say it was unexpected, because I didn't really have high expectations of where it might or might not go, but it's gone to an excellent location. It feels like an ending. I don't feel as if I've had no story arc complete. It feels like a complete story arc. Breck did what they wanted, but it hasn't turned out the way they planned. The result is unique, and it's set up for the next story excellently. I'm looking forward to the next book. I do plan on reading it if I've got any chance of getting it from my library. I do feel a little bit like I have to read something else in between, though. I don't want to risk oversaturation and being an omnivorous reader, I do get bored and a little bit whingy if I read too many of a series one after the other. I need a break. So I'm going to read something else. I'm going to read some old classic sci-fi or fantasy. And then I'll come back to Ann Leckie and hope that her number 2 is just as good as this number 1, which was pretty spectacular. Really, really impressed. Looking forward to the next one.